what binds you, but happily there's more than that. Several interesting aspects. The focus of your presentation is on public space, knowing that you have more work, both you have more work than this, makes it sharp, let's say, as a definition, or as a subject to talk about. The way you were actually working with the white objects you positioned in space, which is really a test, and the way you talked about a test, and that's maybe just the start of the conversation, is intriguing. At a certain point, I understand your proposal, and I see it, but am I correct if I can only read it really if I position it in a Turkish context, where you actually opened up a possibility which did not exist in public space. You changed public space, which is not neutral. We see a square, but we can't think this square is in Western Europe, in Brussels. Otherwise the objects don't make sense. Is this correct?
Well, the question of the form, the cube, no? So, well, I don't think that the cube, as a, say, Platonic object, would be meaningless, so to speak, in the Western context, but because the project is, of course, not about the form. You know? So, but at the same time, it is a challenge for us, for architects, because we also think that the cube or the whiteness, the colorlessness, which are, of course, heritage to us from our modern architectural, say, education, Bauhaus-driven education. So I think in that sense it was also trying to say something about that. So not solely about the Turkish context in a very local environment, but at the same time both. And I can also say this, which is a very interesting story, is that in Gezi, after the Gezi event, some of the stairs were painted in rainbow colors. You know? So someone did it and take photos of it and so on and so forth. And all of a sudden the municipality came back and painted them back to grey. Because the grey is the neutral color in their mind, it's the normative color. What happened that it went viral immediately all around Turkey, and all the stairs started to be painted in rainbow colors. And afterwards they couldn't go back and do it. And what happened with our cubes, this was, you know, after that event, some people went there, and because we weren't there towards the end of our installation, some people went there and really painted our cubes in rainbow colors, which was some kind of a solidarity with the Gezi movement. And again, we weren't there, but the municipality came back and painted them back to white. You know? So you can see the tension, even in the color. Color is not, of course, neutral. Color is ideological in itself, and that's, of course, you know.
You open up the space for a kind of confrontation, occupation, and for also political actors to intervene back with their, let's say, automatic pilot reactions, you could say. But the way you use this test, in a way, you said the test we did, and you said it I think 3 times, is not only a test we did for us, as an intervention in the city, but we actually did it for our practice. We actually learned, it's an observation tool for the practice. In a way, the way you talked about the link between activism and the practice is, in fact, there's no link anymore. It's not that the one was past and the other one is now. It's together, you could say.
Yeah, I think it's difficult to link because you can be outside and inside the practice, the project. If you take the activist part, you're outside and you can hack both parts. So for me it was very uncomfortable. I think for Benoit too, just a lot of times I can't speak. I can be the spokesperson of Disturb and I was the spokesperson many times at the television, and we answered and we criticized the urban project. It was very difficult to be at the same time an urban planner or an architect. It was very, very difficult and uncomfortable. So that's why we stopped, I think, at the time, because everybody was involved in not only as architect, but sometimes as politician or not really politician, but working for politician and others in academics part. And it's very difficult to be both.
If you look at your work, you actually started by criticizing, you could say. but you quickly moved to proposing, organizing workshops. And
we
now
could
you're in practice, and you say, let's have politicians who can decide. This trajectory is quite interesting, I think, because if you look at it from a distance, your practice is in fact trying to find a combination of this, putting things on the agenda, testing things, and then facilitating decision making.
I think at the first time we were not only criticizing, but the proposal was directly there. It's not only say it's not working. We did directly propose the competition, for example, as a procedure, and now we said, damn, why we decide this? Because we have to do the competition. Sometimes we lose, but we do it. We pass on the other side, but I think that it was not just to criticize, it was more than this. So I don't feel different that in that time. I don't feel in a different way. And now, of course, we are doing the urban planning or the architecture, but we still fighting. We're really still fighting. When you are with a mayor in the project, but the project is fighting. The project is politician. If you're outside or inside, you have to fight just to get what you want to put or to a process. It can be a process. It can be a public space. It can be just to put the car off. And to put the car off is very, very difficult just right now. So we have to. I think I'm fighting more like an urban planner than I was fighting like activist.
But if we look back at it's more violent.
It's more violent.
It's less safe.
But no, we have the strategy. We say who can do the more, can do the less. So, for example, if you want a one-way line, we say it's going to be pedestrian. So everybody is yelling, and I have to say, okay, just one-way line. I say, okay, and we do. So
So you Belgianized.
You Belgianize, compromise.
You include the compromise in your strategy.
Yeah, and if it works for the pedestrian, you say, okay, it's okay, we'll put it straight, so it's better.
Maybe one because I think that one of the bigger differences, and also something we really need to discuss today, is you got this opportunity in the framework of, if I understood correctly, in a cultural festival, biennial. So this is the place where you can form this kind of practice. Or do you have other places where you're in academia, you use the cultural festival, biennial? Are there other places, are there many places, or is there a lack? Because there's a clear difference between these situations.
Well, yeah. Well, there are many different venues, of course, especially when you're practicing as an architectural office. So, as I also spoke about, you have to be at least, especially in the Turkish context, you have to be, the way I term it is, you have to be radically pragmatic. Not pragmatic in the conventional sense, but radically pragmatic, which means you have to create new tactics and strategies at every project, so as to survive on the one hand, but at the same time, so as to keep your difference and subversive edge on the other hand, as much as possible. So this project was, yes, part of the biennial, but it was also, as I introduced in the very beginning, that it was also a different approach to the biennial itself, because all the other projects were inside certain spaces that were predetermined. So, and at the same time, I can say that we were thinking about this, and we were thinking of doing this without anyone, like an urban intervention, like an urban graffiti, so to speak, but in 3 dimensions. So we'll just put them, and then we will see what will happen. But then this opportunity arrived, and we said, okay, we can also work with this, and it could be even more interesting in Antalya with these constraints and so on and so forth. And what I mean by this is that sometimes you have to create your own opportunity.
But that's you have other examples of when this works, or when this is necessary, when this is what this needs, let's say. There's a cultural institute like SALT in the center of Istanbul, is paid by banks, but it's a cultural institution. So the field of where culture is operating, where the academia can operate, is very different than what, let's say, most of this public has in mind when thinking about culture and thinking about academia. Where are the spaces you think should be strengthened, or where are the opportunities for, let's say, unleashing potentials that are now, let's say, very restricted because they can only happen once upon a time?
Oh, wow, that's a very logistical question. I really don't want to comment on how we can improve these things because I'm not the one, the actor, to do it. So from my perspective, that is what is radical pragmatism is. You try to find your own radical, say, openness. If you don't have it, you have to open it. So if you have this umbrella which is at the same time protecting you, so to speak, but at the same time limiting you, you have to create some holes and you have to have the water at your face. So, and in that context, well, the private milieu, the public milieu, the common milieu, whatever works, so to speak. So I'm very I'm not sympathetic with the way he's trying to go right now with this project, but I'm sympathetic with the way that he wants to make it.
You recognize this radical pragmatism, or do you think there's another, let's say, position in your work?
No, I was even with Gökhan, because Gökhan was speaking, I was organized myself. It's different context, of course, but I mean, I really like the way of not testing, but to take the project as a laboratory. And I was really, because when we did the working method, we didn't really know what was really happening, and it was just seeing and taking notes and just learning about inside the project. So I think the cubes was a real similarity with our works.
But if you look at, so in the context of Brussels, which is, we heard the introduction this morning, there's a very specific context where an associations and academia changed really the discourse on planning in the 70s. Yeah. The first turning point, the first roundabout. This debate was really, let's say, this shift was really also a shift towards organizations in society that were mostly against projects by the government. It was really a kind of, we are part of the society and we are against the system that is above us. You're in another way of working.
I don't feel against the system. I really feel inside. That's different, because when I was activist, like urban planner, I really feel part of like this. For example, everything is not so black and white. Inside the politician, we have strong allies, strong allies, and that's why you only have a way to change the society. The only way to change the society if you need to make lobby. We were a lobby. We're not really activists. We're lobbyers, and it's exactly the same things. And we were convincing people, and we were convincing the press, and we have allies too in the press, into the press, and that's how we act. It was not only just a battle, against an enemy. It's not like that in the real world. Even if you go to and meet the mayor and
alderman.
Okay, you have inside a group of people. You decide in a city. You have your allies and you have your and so you can. It's more. A bit of convincing people than fighting against the people. That's how I see my work.
But it's also the case that the way you set up certain working formats, like the en brique, which was I was one of the participants. It was when I came to live in Brussels. It's the first thing I did. I think this workshop you organized.
Welcome.
It was a working format, and that's what made it interesting. That connected politicians. Allies and non-allies were all there because you brought.
It was a trap.
It was a trap.
But we have to do trap. You put it and we were into a trap too, because the first en brique start with carte blanche, what do you traduce this?
White paper.
A white paper in the press, and we say
an opinion.
An opinion, and we say to the minister. Your way to make social architecture housing is very expensive and it's bad quality. And that was the title. So what she did, she sent me a nice woman from his cabinet to talk with me and said, they don't want to work with us. And okay, what are we going to do? I don't know, do you have money? Okay, we make a seminary. Okay, we pay for it. And so she came, the minister came, and she talked with everybody. There was 100 people, there was debate, there was seminaries. It took 3 days, I think, on a weekend, and we make a publication after, and it changed. Now there is competition to make the the architecture social housing. So it works, but it's a trap for both sides, because after...
And do you ever have the feeling that for you, you construct it as a trap and they consider it as subsidized entertainment?
I'm not sure.
You never had that feeling?
No, because you just look at the
Sorry to be the
results.
nasty moderator.
You just look at the results and you see if that's
There's
work
changes.
or not, and it works. It's okay. We are nothing in a process, and everybody is gonna forget this. You know, we're just a part of doing things that we think at that moment we have to do that things, and that's all. After, you know, all the people who are the professional of the activism really don't understand what I do, and don't feel like I do the same job than them, because I'm more lobbyist than an activist. So it's very difficult just to see yourself. I think we have to forget really our ego when you do that sort of things. You just have to put your hands into the motor and change it. So you're going to be a little bit dirty.
Yeah. That's where the radical pragmatism is binding you together. That's quite clear. The one last element, if you look at these projects, what both of you presented, they are really, how to say, they're not only directed towards solving a specific problem, they are also trying to change a culture. Walking Madou, I think, if I read it in retrospect, the reason why this was done as a test was also because it changed perspectives of a lot of people that were not from this neighborhood on what public space could be. And whether it was not built or built, in fact, it doesn't really matter. Everybody had seen the extreme version of it, which changed. And I have the feeling you can read your project as well as something that indeed you learned from as a practice, but at the same time you open up a potential that will maybe come back in 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 years in projects that can be built, but it helps to change a culture. Do you see this as a structural part of your practice? This role of, let's say, you are in academia, this must have a reason, I guess. Maybe you can explain how you moved from practice to this broadening, and then what this allows you to do, which the radical pragmatism purely does not allow you to do, maybe.
Oh yeah, okay, the relationship between the practice and theory. Well, of course, immediately when we had our office, and even before that we were doing these student competitions and so on and so forth, and every time it was, when we thought about our projects, it was never about creating a solution. It was always about constituting a problem, and not even a question, so to speak, a problem, and seeing what people and we can do with this problem, and showing people that they are not pre-given. Function is not pre-given, mobility for this project is not pre-given, staticness, these are not pre-given, but we always found public space is not pre-given. No? You can do different things in public space, create it, transform it into a commonality and so on and so forth, or have it a very frigid environment in which, in the benches you sit and then you move on to your own work and so on and so forth. So in that sense, I think that's why I have a lot of different ideas about political theory and philosophy, so I wanted to test them in both sides. Both trying to deepen it as much as possible in the theoretical realm, and the PhD, of course, always helps, more than you need. And on the other side, you have...
Helps more than you need?
Yeah. And on the other side...
It's more than helping.
On the other hand, you also have the practical side, and it's always hybridization. And even when someone who is not in the academia, there is still theory in their work. It is an ontological coupling, but it is about how you unpack them, how you enrich them, how you try to combine them. So, and for me, it was that side.
Are there questions from the room or reactions on this debate? Nadia?
Thank you for your presentation. Actually, I very much like the last thing you said about the public space is not pre-given, because I think as a designer of public space, what you realize is that in order to design real, authentic, genuine public space, you need to put yourself into question. Or let's say it differently, you need to create the conditions for this public space to be generated. So the public space is not designing public space is not just about some decoration here and there, but you as a designer have to be put into question while designing public space. So I mean, this is something I wanted to, how do you see it? So it's the role of a designer of public space.
Is it the question of design as a bathroom is a question of design? You have a program, you design it, you lay it out, and it's built, and it's done? Or is it something else? Is your position, what you can do with design, something else than in this bathroom?
Well, I can, I mean, I think it's more of a comment than a question, but at the same time I can add something to this, that of course the role of the architect is not pre-given as well. No? So that's also very important to understand. The architect is not the one who constructs. The architect is not the one who conceives, and solely, I mean merely. The architect is another actor among many actors, so we are all sharing this space, and at the same time the public space or the environment or whatever have you, the building is also an actor, and as you know, our experiment made us aware, the animals are also actors and so on and so forth. So you have this very interesting, elusive assemblage, this network, in which everything has their different degrees of agency. And as an architect, you have a beautiful opportunity to combine some of them, to select some of them, and at the same time, of course, this is very violent because whenever there is selection, there is also exclusion. So you have to be very aware what you are excluding, and sometimes you cannot be aware. There are many different unconscious ways, and you're just being controlled by some part of an apparatus or system or within the constraints and so on and so forth. But still, it is about creating a network of relations. Architecture is. So this is a definition of architecture in spatial terms, but at the same time, of course, it has immense effects on the way people live. So it is immediately political, immediately social, immediately ecological, no? Because it is at the same time about the natural environment, which we usually in our enlightenment say, logic, we try to master, we try to, think of nature as something secondary to us, as some kind of a feminine, so to speak, approach in a paternalist understanding. That's why the Mother Earth myth is one of the, most pathetic ways of understanding nature. Nature as some kind of a, woman, and so on and so forth, which is even, I would say, damaging and problematic to the understanding of feminist and approach to what womanness is, so to speak.
Now you connected everything with everything. Which is always magnificent to do. One last question for the both of you, but I first look to the room. I have one last, but somebody else wants to react. You don't like yellow, you like yellow, rather white.
I want to say something about this radical pragmatism, because in one hand it seems like a very good, how could I put, a very good concept to deal with these legal authorities and so on. But I mean, when you think of the other world, I mean, if everyone gets on this role of a lobbyist or this radical pragmatist, it's kind of a hard to, I mean, how will you act in this kind of new world? I mean, it's someone who is fond of cars and who loves petrol and oil and so on becomes a radical pragmatist, and then we are blown. It's just, I mean, and also, in another point of view, about all this co-production and all these participation efforts and all this, how people just react to this urban environment, it also, I think it's in a conflict situation with this role of an architect as a radical pragmatist. So it doesn't fit well in my mind, actually.
If I understand well, one question, the first part of the question is in fact, how do you change the givens in which you can be pragmatist? Because to be within the situation and to be radical doesn't change the situation. And the second question is rather, how do you actually position the architect as an author with its own authorship signature in relation to a kind of a complete co-production situation? And I think that's actually that was also my last question. There's a huge tension, I think, in the architectural disciplines at this moment between the ones pleading for much more co-production, much more involvement, much less immediately legible authorship signature, and a very strong culture of signature, more referring to the own discipline rather than to the world outside. So auto-referential, self-referential, and you have these two tendencies which I think I believe they need to find a new relationship with one another. It can't continue, let's say, diverging the way it is diverging now. But maybe your reactions as a conclusion. So first and second question.
Yeah, what you say about there's other lobbyists is totally right. For example, there is one organization called the Right of Driving and Parking. No, I assure you, it exists, and it's a powerful lobbying who is really against the lobbying of the bike, and so it exists effectively all kind of
even further than that, in Brussels, the city with the European Commission, Volkswagen had an enormous concentration of lobbyists to make sure that their way of evading the controls would work.
So why we are not very neutral? We're never neutral when we act. So of course, and I think that the way of seeing like the opposite in the signature and the coordinator of the lobbying of the inhabitants and all. I don't think the border is so straight and so because what we did, for example, the Walking My Do is a kind of manifest, no, and we speak in somewhere in the public space, and putting a colors on the floor is not neutral. It's really not neutral. We really took a side. We took the side. And not the side of the right of driving and parking, that's for sure. So at the time, we're not coordinating everybody, we're not trying to get the compromise. The compromise at all the time, that's not true. And I think the things are more complicated than just there is the architect with the signature. I think there is more the architect making money and the one making it by patient, which is very different.
Gökhan?
Okay.
So radical pragmatism is not the only solution for our world.
Yeah, well, it is not that I think I am suggesting all the architects to become all of a sudden radical pragmatists. But of course, to talk about it a little bit, it becomes very generic when we have this keyword, radical pragmatism. Radical pragmatism for what, of course, and how? Because it does not have an essence in itself. Everyone is pragmatic and everyone is trying to find their own way in the world, no? And even the stone and the birds and so on. So with radical pragmatism, what I mean especially specifically about this project, because for the others we need to speak about them in more detail, is that a radical pragmatism for new possibilities of spatial experiences. So in that sense, in order to find and in order to enrich and in order to expand those possibilities, you're trying to come up with some kind of radical pragmatism. With other projects, well, it's very different. If you're radical, then it will not be radically pragmatist, I guess, but then that would be a different question. And about the problem of the authorship, okay, well, that's from 1960s on, it has been discussed in all the disciplines. What is an author, the death of the author, with Barthes, with Foucault, and in literature, isn't it the readers that themselves already construct the books and so on and so forth? So are we really authors? And so it is a very big, of course, discussion. But I can just say this, that what we need to do is to understand that it is not that there is the dissolution of the author, but at the same time there is not the top-down, monarchical, like, the architect, the superstar, or the architect, the legislator kind of approach. We are always in between these networks, that's what I'm trying to say. We all have different vectors of power in different projects, and at the same time we are within the apparatuses of the system. We are never outside the system, and it is a way of how to create within the system some kind of a manipulation, some kind of a bending, so that you can create a deterritorialization, so to speak, a line of flight in which you can create a new milieu, a new approach, and a new sensibility or a new imagining, just like in Kezi or in a project, in your architectural project. So that is the way to do it, because whenever we deem ourselves as if we are outside the system, I think that would be a very interesting position, because I would want to understand how we think of ourselves outside any state apparatuses, any capitalist economic mechanism. That would be very interestingly problematic for me.
I understand. Thank you both. I think we will continue this debate in the next session. First an applause.